Hi, this is Burns Hargis with Inside OSU. Joining us today is a very special guest, Steve Forbes, who is the chairman and CEO of Forbes magazine, a former presidential candidate, and one of the really great and influential thinkers in the United States and the world, especially on matters of the economy. Welcome.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
We are delighted to have you, and it's one of our initiatives to attract important people to our campus in Stillwater and also to Tulsa, and to introduce.
It's also nice to come to important people.
Well, you're very kind, but you certainly fit right into that initiative, and we appreciate it very much. Well, we've inaugurated a new president, and the former president came in with a recession, and he's leaving with a recession. What do you expect an Obama administration to do about this economic crisis?
Well, they're going to do what you would expect partially it would do, and that is spend a lot of money on stimulus, even though stimulus spending per se doesn't revive an economy, as Japan's demonstrated, and with smaller programs we've demonstrated in the past. I hope it's going to be combined with other things that will actually help get this economy back on its feet, which can be done fairly quickly.
What would those be?
One would be in terms of their spending, that they have some sensible tax cuts, easing depreciation schedules, perhaps even reducing corporate tax rates as a gift for having more spending power, things like that. Getting rid of this thing called mark-to-market with the regulators, which has destroyed bank balance sheets. Mark-to-market in the real world means that the regulators go into the banks, auditors go in the banks and say, mark down the value of your assets, even if the losses haven't taken place. So it has really worsened the crisis. Put in barriers to short selling. We had an uptick rule, said you couldn't short sell a stock unless the stock was going up in price. SEC got rid of it just as the crisis was hitting, bring it back. Things like that would go a long ways to getting the credit system working again. So a combination of sensible regulatory changes. The only ones who'd be upset would be some accountants, but I think the new president can survive that. Do a few sensible things on the tax side, even though you're going to have a lot of spending, and this thing will start to turn around.
Well, as an accountant, I can tell you that we actually like change because it makes more work for us.
Well, and that's true. As you know, in the early part of this decade, the accounting profession got whacked over the head for laxity and things like Enron, and their punishment was their business was tripled with the result of Sarbanes-Oxley.
Exactly.
So we all, and the only other one that has that phenomenon, in addition to accounting and lawyers, is the government. The government fails, as it did in this housing crisis, and its punishment is it has more powers. So
there you go.
Peculiar world we
little oxymoron. This has happened so fast, and most of us who are not on Wall Street and in the day-to-day melee of it wonder how on earth could it have all happened. I mean, we read a lot about the housing bubble, and we read about subprime mortgages and all the rest, but I don't think anybody anticipated this precipitous drop in the price of oil and other commodities, as well as all the rest. How did all that come together all at once, and we just hit the wall?
Well, economic disasters and other disasters in history precisely happened because people didn't realize the consequences of what they were doing. And this is a prime example of it. When the Federal Reserve 4 years ago started to weaken the dollar because they thought that would be a way of getting the economy moving, and the Treasury Department went along with it because it thought it would improve our trade balance, trashing the dollar had the effect of helping create the housing bubble. When you have excess money out there, it's going to go to work somewhere. And then we had two entities called Fannie and Freddie. And unfortunately, that brought out the worst of the government and the private sector. With the government implicit guarantee, they could borrow to a fairly well. Markets didn't care because Uncle Sam was going to take care of them. So they helped finance this binge. In 2 years, they guaranteed $1.5 trillion of junk mortgages. Nice work, guys.
Yeah. It seems like the approach that we're taking here is a Keynesian inspired approach.
Yes, it is.
And at least to a layman, I must say that it would seem to me, with all of these funds going into the economy, in the manner that they are, that at some point you're going to have a heck of an inflation problem.
Well, I think you will if the Fed goes and makes the mistakes that it's made in recent years. But I think even somebody like Bernanke occasionally learns something. And this summer, at the same time they're creating a new lending facility, it seemed like almost every day, they started to do something they hadn't done before, and that is the dollars they put out, they started to remove the dollars in what they call open market operations. So they would give a loan to XYZ Bank, let's say I'm picking a number, say $1 million, and at the same time remove, say, $800,000 from the rest of the banking system. And so that's why in September and October, when panic was at an all-time high, gold didn't go through the roof. It had already peaked earlier this year, 2008, $1,000 an ounce. In July, when the Fed started to make these changes, it was about 900. Today it's about 800. And in September, October, it never got above 900. So I think the Fed is aware of it, that at some point they're going to have to aggressively remove, I hope they're aware of it, remove some of this excess money they've created.
Your magazine, all the papers for the last few weeks have been just covered up with this Bernie Madoff scandal. I assume you know Bernie Madoff.
No, and I had no money invested with him.
Is that right? You don't know him? You never met him?
No, knew the name, but never had.
I'll be darned. So he wasn't just a household name on Wall Street?
Not really. Some people knew him from days of old when he was with the early NASDAQ. But his firm, even though it had a lot of money, was not one of the major players. And as a matter of fact, his brokerage firm, which apparently was a legitimate operation, had fallen behind the times in terms of handling block trades and the like. There's an item in the paper the other day that he continued to increase people's salaries, even though the volume of his business continued to go down and down.
How is it possible that he could do this?
Well, he did on a bigger scale, obviously a huge bigger scale, of stuff that goes on all the time. These schemes, variations of these schemes of Ponzi schemes happen all the time. You had Bayou, collapse of a fund earlier in 2008. The magnitude was what was huge, and how he was able to keep this going as long as he did. We'll find out in these investigations. Maybe park some of the money somewhere. But it was a gross abuse of trust. Somebody you trusted, and these fund of funds they'll investigate. They were getting fees. When you direct funds to somebody, you get a fee.
Right.
And was it a situation where you didn't actually know the details, but you knew you shouldn't ask too closely as you're reaping these tens of millions in fees of directing these billions in there? So it took on a life of its own. And the funny thing, what did him in apparently was his very success, quote unquote, was that at a time when everyone else was losing money, he was making people figure, well, I can get money out of here to make up for some of my losses elsewhere. So they started to ask for the money back, and kapoop, wasn't there.
He couldn't get it. So he really was, in a way, a victim
of his own
scam.
Yeah,
of his own scam. We have a strong patron of Oklahoma State University that would like your tie very much today, and that's Boone Pickens, who has been ubiquitous with his Pickens Plan around the United States. While I know a lot of the steam has gone out of the reform and energy independence movement because of the prices today, what's your take on the Pickens Plan?
Well, my take is God bless him. Let's go ahead with it. And one of the things that should be done anyway, regardless of whether Boone pushes this thing or not, I think he will continue to push it. Not only this, but to changes natural gas. One of the ideas he has, which I think eventually will come to pass, is that trucks in this country, major vehicles, use natural gas. Cars, it's not practical. Major trucks, it has some real validity. But one of the things we should do, and I hope comes out of this stimulus plan, one of the good things we might get out of this thing, is modernizing the electric grid in this country. We have, in effect, 3 grid systems. Not very good, antiquated, wastes an enormous amount of electricity, and prey to breakdowns such as we had a few years ago. So modernize that, saves a lot of energy, and makes it possible, if you would generate electricity, very easy to get it on a national grid.
What do you think, Steve, is the reason that we have never developed a so-called energy plan? I mean, presidents have been talking about this since before Nixon, and not one has ever come forth with really a comprehensive energy plan.
Well, the problem is when they've done a comprehensive energy plan, it's been a disaster. Jimmy Carter was going to have synfuels, which was a casebook example, if anyone wants to look, of how you shouldn't let government get involved in some things. It was a disaster. Wasted tons of billions of dollars. And so you need a proper approach. And maybe if we stop using the word plan, maybe we'd actually get something done. One of the things would be, and I hope it'll happen, is remove some of the barriers, which is starting on nuclear power. We know that works. The technology is there. France has proven it. Japan's proven it. We've proven it.
What about the waste?
The waste right now is stored in the plants. There are ways that it can be done more permanently. Unfortunately, the Senate Majority Leader comes from the state where it's supposed to go, Nevada, and so that may be delayed for a while. But in terms of storage itself, the way they do it now is far less dangerous than the spill-offs you get in other forms of energy, and certainly with coal. So that can be, the technology's there to deal with it if we have the will to do it. And in terms of energy production, we know we have tens of billions of barrels, an equivalent amount of natural gas offshore. And we know we have the technology to do it in a way that doesn't pollute. When Katrina hit a few years ago, some of those platforms in the Gulf were blown away where they did do offshore drilling, and guess what? No big oil spills. So when the Norwegians and the British have shown you can drill offshore very safely, thank you very much. And if Boone's thing on wind works, fine. There are other things that are going on in terms of energy efficiencies, energy breakthroughs that are taking place. We'll soon be able to generate a lot of our electricity on our own and not even know it. So just have an environment where these things can come to pass. But those who bleat the most about energy independence are the most vociferous opponents of offshore drilling, of drilling in ANWR, of nuclear power, and things we know we already have in hand.
Yeah.
Hello.
Let's talk about the magazine business a second. Forbes magazine is obviously one of the iconic business journals in America and has been for many, many years. But obviously there's a profound change going on in the journalism world. I saw where the Seattle Post-Dispatch apparently gave notice to their employees that unless something changed, they could literally go out of business, which would seem unheard of. Another major paper in a major market was offered for sale not long ago and didn't fetch a bidder. And it all has to do, I think, with the fact that young people don't tend to read newspapers, and moreover, nobody's figured out how to make any money on the internet. So my question to you is, what's the future of a Forbes? How's Forbes doing? And what do you see down the road in that respect? Because journalism students actually have to tailor their studies for the future, not for the past.
Yeah, well, it's a world in which, as the cliche goes, you can eat well or sleep well, but not both. And in terms of media, the cliche there is the web ate print, and now the web's eating the web, and with Google sucking up a lot of the advertising. So there will, and on the print side, I think more of the immediate pressure is on newspapers, where indeed it's not just people reading online, but things like Craigslist have eviscerated classifieds, which was the real source of revenue for newspapers. Who needs classifieds? Go online. Very simple, nationwide, free most of the time, hard to beat. And but in magazines, fortunately, they still, I think, have a real function in the sense of it's relaxing. People have a certain frame of mind when they do it, not on the scale we've had in the past, but less kind of the pressure that you do with commodity immediate news. And on the magazines, and amazingly too, even though we have a booming business on the web, we have our website alone has over 20 million unique visits a month.
You charge for your website?
That's the flavor of the month now. The journal charged, looked like it was a mistake. Now they have it that if you link into it, they let you stay in, but only on that story. If you want more, you pay up. So everyone says, maybe that's the way to go. I'm not so sure.
Nobody knows, do they?
Nobody knows. But I think what you're going to see emerge on the web, and where we're doing it, is you carve out unique pieces of real estate and sell that at a premium price because it's focused on a particular audience that a particular client needs.
It needs that information.
Needs that audience, and you can do it, and we're doing more and more of that. So, but it's constant. You cannot relax on it, and what works today may not work tomorrow, and that's why we're living through one of these periods. And newspapers, I think there'll be a handful of survivors, but I think what you're also going to find is certain businesses in a city are going to buy a newspaper, or take one now, they're almost being given away, and use it as a marketing vehicle, so it's part of something rather than a standalone.
What do you think? You ran for president on the Republican side. The Republican Party is obviously in the ditch right now. Has come out worse than battered and bruised from the last elections. What should the Republican Party do? What do you envision is going to happen?
Well, I think the very fact that Barack Obama is very capable, very shrewd, and I think he's going to work to avoid the mistakes that happened to Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter. So the Republicans are really going to have to get their act together, and the only way you do it is by advocating, again, the principles that made you a major party in the first place, and not fall into the seductive mode that if you spend on earmarks and pork spending, you can outdo the Democrats. You never will. Forget it. They've got that game wrapped up. And I think people like Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, Eric Cantor of Virginia, and others understand this, and that is a strong and stable dollar, simplified low tax rates, a positive reform of things like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. You can win on that because people really don't believe in tax and spend. They don't really believe in more government control, certainly not when we've seen what the government does. They don't believe in more unionization. They've seen what that did to the big three in Detroit. So people aren't left. They were really profoundly disgusted, you use a strong word, and disillusioned by what's happened in recent years, and they wanted a change. And they were willing to take the risk because what they saw, they said, this ain't working. And to say, well, Barack Obama, with his economic policies of raising taxes, will wreck the economy. Well, what do you think it is now? Impossible situation.
What do you? Is there another run for president and Steve Forbes?
No, I'm an agitator now. I like stirring the pot and trying to educate other candidates, which I think is harder than educating graduate and undergraduate students from my limited experience.
Speaking of whom, I mentioned journalism students, but what would be your advice to people in college today and coming out and going into this very uncertain world, very different world, technologically changing world? What would be your advice to a son or daughter you had in college right now?
Well, and this will play to the business you're in, and that is develop that brain. It's not the specific knowledge you get, it's dealing with the brain the way you're supposed to deal with your muscle, because you have to be prepared for a world that is going to change. You know you're going to hold several jobs during your lifetime. There's no such thing as lifetime employment, unless you're with the government, maybe. And you may have to change fields. A fellow named Norman Borlaug, who invented the Green Revolution, got a Nobel Prize for it, once said to college students, he said, don't get specialized too early. He said, I was a chemist. That's what I majored with. Thankfully, he said he took economics. He took political science, because when he came up with this breakthrough, it's not enough to come with a breakthrough. You have to figure out how do you get governments to do it, what are the economics of it, what are the politics of it. So you're going to have to draw on disciplines that you never thought you might have to draw on. So absorb.
So it'd be good. It's a good strategy for students to take a broad array of
and even
disciplines.
those who study science and engineering. One reason properly done a liberal arts education is good, an element of that, it helps creativity. You can learn by rote science and engineering, but the real value added comes from the breakthroughs. Steve Jobs got his mentality on design by studying calligraphy.
Right.
So be loose, get the brain working, and find something you have a passion about, as Steve Jobs did, and you might make a living at it.
Well, that's pretty good advice to our students and to our faculty and staff, and certainly to me. I appreciate it. Well, I've been talking to Steve Forbes, who's here for the Spear School of Business Executive Briefing Series. We hope we can have you back on campus again. You've made a great impression, and we've all learned a lot. Thank you very much.
It's a great pleasure to being here. Thank you for having me.